Have you ever met someone who grew old but learned absolutely nothing from life? They collect years like dust on a bookshelf. But wisdom, true wisdom, never arrives. There's a dangerous myth in our culture that aging by itself brings enlightenment. But Carl Jung knew better. Aging without reflection is just biological decay. Wisdom, on the other hand, is an act of rebellion against passivity. It is not about the body's wrinkles, it's about the soul's transformation. Jung argued that many people enter the second half of life carrying the illusions of youth. They cling to ambitions, social masks, and the desperate need to appear strong. But time alone doesn't dismantle the ego, it just exhausts it. The myth that age equals wisdom allows people to avoid inner work. It creates elders who are merely old children, reactive, insecure, and terrified of silence. In Jungian terms, they remain identified with the persona, the outer mask, and never descend into the depths of the self. In indigenous cultures, the elder is a sacred figure not because they are old, but because they have died many small deaths of ego, of attachments, of illusions. They've wrestled with their own darkness and emerged more whole. Modern society, by contrast, often discards its elderly, not just because they are old, but because they offer no inner light. They never cultivated it. Jung believed that real aging is an alchemical process. It demands confrontation with the unconscious and the willingness to die, symbolically so that something new may be born. If we believe that time will teach us everything, we stop learning. If we think wrinkles equal wisdom, we stop evolving. Jung invites us to look at aging not as a slow descent into irrelevance, but as an invitation to become something radically deeper. So no, time does not teach. Time only opens the door. Whether we walk through it is entirely up to us. Most people think life peaks in youth, in their 20s or 30s. When the body is strong, the energy is high, and the world feels like it's at your feet. But Carl Jung proposed something much more profound and unsettling. The true journey of the soul begins at midlife. It's not until we lose our youthful illusions that we begin to ask the deeper questions. Who am I beyond my roles? Why am I here? What is this all for? Jung described the midlife crisis not as a breakdown, but as a breakthrough. It's a call from the unconscious, a whisper that turns into a roar if ignored. The first half of life is about building careers, identities, families. But the second half is about meaning. It's the time when we must turn inward, face the shadow, and realign with our deeper self. And this, Jung insisted, is not optional. Ignore the call, and life begins to rot from the inside. The problem is that modern society is obsessed with youth. It worships the surface, the visible, the fast. We're taught to fear aging rather than honor it. That's why so many people hit 40 or 50 and feel lost. The outer achievements no longer satisfy. Something else is stirring, something ancient, sacred, and deeply personal. Jung saw this as the individuation process, the path to wholeness. It's painful, yes. It involves sacrifice, loss, and letting go of the false self. But it's also liberating. It's where wisdom is born. The second half of life is not the beginning of the end. It's the beginning of authenticity. But only if we have the courage to answer the call. There's a tragic figure that appears in many lives, perhaps in your own family or community. He is old but not wise, experienced but not enlightened. He speaks often but says little. He's angry, rigid, bitter. This is the aged ego clinging to control in a world it no longer understands. Jung warned about this character. He's the man who never did the inner work and now uses age as a shield. He thinks years justify his opinions. He confuses cynicism with wisdom. This man could have been a sage, but he refused to evolve. The world changed around him, and instead of adapting, he hardened. He attacks what he doesn't understand, dismisses the young, and avoids his own inner darkness. He lives in nostalgia, but it's a prison of memory, not a temple of insight. This is not wisdom, it is the shadow of what could have been. Jung believed that the ego must die repeatedly for the self to emerge. But if the ego survives untouched, it mutates into something grotesque, an authoritarian old man with no light inside. And here's the terrifying part. This can happen to any of us. If we do not question our beliefs, examine our fears, and allow ourselves to be vulnerable, we risk becoming this very figure. Real wisdom comes from surrender, from unlearning, from listening more than speaking. Jung said the task of the second half of life is to let go of the ego's need to dominate. Only then can the archetype of the wise old man emerge, not as a role, but as an essence. If we do not make peace with our shadow, we risk becoming its puppet. So, next time you meet someone older who radiates peace, humility, and insight, don't assume age gave them that. They fought for it, inside, alone. Beneath the surface of every human life lies a vast, silent realm, the unconscious. Most people live above it, floating on routines, social norms, and inherited beliefs. But Jung taught us that true transformation only begins when we dive beneath the surface. The unconscious is not just a psychological curiosity, it's a sacred reservoir of forgotten truths, repressed fears, and untapped wisdom. And when we reach the second half of life, the unconscious no longer whispers, it demands to be heard. The dreams become stranger, the emotions more unpredictable. The rational mind begins to lose control. For many, this feels like madness. But for Jung, it was the beginning of individuation. You are being summoned, not to lose yourself, but to rediscover who you truly are, to meet the parts of yourself you've denied, suppressed, or never even knew existed. This inner journey is not linear. It is a descent, like Orpheus into the underworld, and like any mythic hero, you face dragons, your childhood wounds, the lies you've told yourself, the identities that once protected you but now imprison you. There is pain here, yes, but also treasure. The unconscious holds the forgotten keys to your wholeness. Jung insisted that ignoring the unconscious leads to a shallow, fragmented existence. The soul shrinks, the psyche rebels, and life begins to feel empty, no matter how successful you appear. But if you listen, truly listen, you'll hear its guidance in symbols, synchronicities, and intuition. The unconscious isn't your enemy, it's the voice of your soul. And in the second half of life, it becomes your greatest teacher, if you're brave enough to sit in the silence and hear what it has to say. We've all met them. Those rare individuals who carry something beyond age. They don't just grow old, they grow luminous. Their presence is calming. Their words seem to come from another dimension. They are the embodiment of the archetype Jung called the wise old man, or wise old woman. But make no mistake, this archetype is not guaranteed with age. It must be earned. In Jungian psychology, archetypes are universal patterns within the collective unconscious. The wise one is not just a symbol of knowledge, but of integration. This person has faced their shadow, mourned their illusions, and forged meaning from suffering. They are not perfect, they are whole. And that's what makes their wisdom different. It's not about knowing everything. It's about knowing oneself deeply and being unafraid to admit what one does not know. Many people reach old age having learned only how to survive. They've mastered the outer world, but ignored the inner one. The wise one, however, has done the opposite. They've sacrificed appearances for essence, comfort for clarity. They've walked through fire, not to destroy themselves, but to purify what was never truly theirs. This archetype is rare in modern society because we don't value inner work. We value speed, productivity, and image. But true wisdom requires slowness. It demands silence, solitude, and the courage to face what most run from. It's no surprise that those who illuminate are often misunderstood, even ridiculed, yet they shine anyway. Jung believed that becoming the wise one is the ultimate goal of individuation. It's not a role to play, it's a presence to embody. And when such a person enters a room, you feel it, not because they speak loudly, but because they have become a mirror to the divine within you. There is a moment in life that breaks you, a divorce, a death, a betrayal, an illness, or a slow-burning emptiness that refuses to leave. Most see this as misfortune, but Carl Jung saw something deeper, a portal. Crisis, he believed, is the psyche's way of initiating transformation. It's not punishment, it's a summons. The old structure must collapse for something new to be born. In the modern world, we are taught to fear breakdowns, to suppress them with pills, distractions, and busyness. But Jung saw these ruptures as sacred. When the ego no longer holds, when the masks fall off, when life stops making sense, that's when the unconscious finally has a chance to speak. Crisis is chaos, yes, but it is also creative. Like the forest fire that clears dead wood, it makes space for new growth. Many people resist this process. They try to rebuild the old life, paste the old masks back on, and pretend nothing changed. But those who listen, those who surrender, step into a deeper path. They begin the work of individuation. They ask hard questions. They confront the shadow. They stop performing and start becoming. Jung himself went through such a crisis. After his split with Freud, he entered a period of deep inner exploration, filled with visions, dreams, and encounters with the unknown. Out of this darkness came his greatest insights. His red book, once hidden, reveals how intensely personal and painful this process was, but it was real, and it birthed a wisdom that continues to guide millions. So if you are in crisis now, know this: it's not the end. It might be your beginning. The signs are everywhere, in your emotions, your body, your dreams. Jung would tell you, don't run, don't numb it, enter the fire. On the other side is not just healing, but transformation. At some point, the mask becomes too heavy. The persona, the social face we wear to fit into the world, starts to crack. We may have built it with care, the achiever, the parent, the professional, the good person. But with age, especially as we cross the threshold into the second half of life, these identities begin to feel hollow. Something inside rebels. This is not a breakdown, it's a breakthrough. Jung called it the encounter with the shadow. The shadow is everything we've disowned, denied, or feared about ourselves. It's not just the dark and monstrous. Sometimes it's the passionate, the creative, the free, and it follows us silently, influencing our choices, sabotaging our relationships, and haunting our dreams. In youth, we can ignore it. In midlife and beyond, it becomes impossible to avoid. The mask slips, the truth emerges. This is why many people experience depression, anxiety, or a deep sense of unrest as they age. It's not just chemical, it's existential. The unconscious is rising. It wants integration. Jung insisted that aging demands confrontation with the shadow. Without it, we grow bitter, rigid, and resentful, trapped in defensive pride. But when we face the shadow, something miraculous happens. We reclaim ourselves. Aging then becomes a sacred descent. We strip away illusions. We shed societal expectations. We face the parts of ourselves we were taught to hide. And in that confrontation, we find gold. The shadow is not an enemy. It is the gatekeeper to wholeness. If we have the courage to look it in the eye, we unlock a deeper peace, one not based on image, but on truth. Carl Jung's memoir, Memories, Dreams, Reflections, is not a traditional autobiography. It is a map of the inner world, a journey through dreams, visions, synchronicities, and philosophical insights. In it, Jung shows us what true aging looks like when lived consciously. It's not about retirement or relaxation. It's about reflection, revelation, and the integration of a lifetime's worth of experience into wisdom. Most people treat old age as a slow decline, but Jung saw it as the flowering of the soul. In our later years, the psyche shifts focus. The outer world loses its grip. The inner world becomes vivid. Old dreams return. Memories once forgotten resurface with new meaning. Patterns once misunderstood now reveal their purpose. This is not nostalgia, it is revelation. Jung believed that aging reconnects us with the eternal. The ego softens, the boundaries dissolve, and we begin to glimpse the archetypal. Death, once feared, becomes a doorway, not an end, but a return. In this stage, the symbolic becomes more important than the material. We ask different questions. What legacy am I leaving? What truths have I learned? What stories do I carry that others might need? These questions are not answered quickly. They require solitude, contemplation, and the willingness to embrace mystery. But for those who engage in this inner work, old age becomes luminous. There is gold here, not the kind that glitters, but the kind that enlightens. And Jung, through his final writings and reflections, reminds us that the final chapters of life may be the richest of all, if we dare to write them with honesty. There's a peculiar paradox with those who've truly attained wisdom. They speak less. They do not rush to offer advice. They do not dominate conversations. Instead, they listen, they observe. Their presence alone seems to communicate something deeper than words. Jung understood this. He knew that true wisdom isn't loud, it's quiet, like a mountain at dusk or a candle in the dark. In a world obsessed with noise and opinion, silence is often mistaken for ignorance. But the sage understands that much of life cannot be spoken. It must be felt, intuited, and lived. Wisdom, Jung suggested, emerges not just from what one knows, but from what one can hold without needing to explain. Silence is not the absence of thought. It is the mastery of it. This silence is not passive. It is powerful. It can hold contradictions, griefs, paradoxes. The wise have suffered enough to know that easy answers are often wrong. They've lived through the storm, made peace with uncertainty, and now carry an inner stillness that cannot be faked. When they speak, it's not to impress, it's to reveal. The sage knows that transformation is not taught, it's caught. You don't change people by arguing, you change them by being, and that being must be rooted in inner work, humility, and the hard-won clarity that only time and suffering can bring. Jung's presence was like this. He didn't seek followers, he sought truth, and those who encountered him often felt changed, not by what he said, but by what he had become. In a world addicted to volume, the silence of the sage is a radical act, and perhaps the truest sign of wisdom. There is a silent liberation that arrives with true wisdom, the freedom from performance. In youth, we strive to prove our worth to our parents, our peers, our society. We accumulate achievements, titles, possessions, hoping each one will validate our existence. But something happens in the second half of life. If we have done the inner work, we begin to see through the illusion. And when that veil lifts, a powerful truth emerges. We have nothing left to prove. Carl Jung believed that the ego, when unchecked, is a tireless performer. It lives for applause and shrinks in silence. But with age and insight, the ego's grip loosens. We realize that true value is not external. It is intrinsic. We are not what we do. We are not what others say. We are what remains when all else is stripped away. This shift is not about resignation. It is about liberation. The wise no longer chase validation. They don't fear being misunderstood. They are no longer addicted to visibility. In fact, they often retreat from the spotlight, not out of bitterness, but because they've discovered a deeper joy in stillness. They live in alignment, not performance. In essence, not expectation. There is a beautiful power in this kind of existence. It radiates peace, it invites authenticity, it allows others to drop their masks too. Jung often spoke of wholeness as the ultimate goal, not perfection. And this wholeness includes embracing our limitations, our failures, our humanity. When we no longer need to prove, we finally begin to live. Time, when seen through the lens of the unconscious, is not just a force of decay. It is a crucible. It burns away the false, the temporary, the egoic. But what remains, if we let it, is something precious. Carl Jung often spoke of aging as a process of alchemy, not in the literal transformation of metals, but in the symbolic refinement of the soul. Time, he believed, is the true alchemist. It offers us the fire, but it is we who must endure the burn. In traditional alchemy, there is a stage called nigredo, blackening. It is the phase of death, dissolution, decomposition. Many in midlife enter this stage unknowingly. Their life falls apart. Their identity no longer fits. Their dreams feel dead. But Jung taught that this was not the end. It was the beginning of transformation. The soul must be stripped before it can be remade. After nigredo comes albedo, whitening, the beginning of purification. Then rubedo, reddening, the integration of opposites, the rebirth of the self. This is the spiritual map of aging consciously. It is not passive, it is not easy, but it is golden. Those who age with awareness often radiate something ineffable. They are not youthful in body, but they are ageless in spirit. They've been through the fire and come out with fewer illusions and greater compassion. They understand that time didn't just steal their youth, it revealed their essence. And in that essence, there is gold, not the kind you spend, but the kind you become. There's a myth that the elderly become more conservative, more rigid, more attached to rules. But Jung presented another path, the path of the rebel elder. Not the angry contrarian, but the one who sees through the lies of inherited morality and dares to live by inner truth. This figure is rare, but when they appear, they awaken everyone around them. They are not guided by culture, they are guided by conscience. In youth, we are often bound by the need to belong. We adopt the values of our family, our religion, our society. But as we mature, especially in the second half of life, we are invited to question, not just what we were taught, but why we believed it. Jung saw this as essential to individuation. The authentic self cannot emerge while enslaved to borrowed beliefs. The rebel elder is not without principles. Quite the opposite. They are deeply principled, but their values are not second-hand. They are forged in the fires of experience, contemplation, and soul-searching. They may reject conventional success, challenge religious dogma, or defy cultural norms, not to be provocative, but to be free. They do not live to please. They live to be true. This kind of elder is threatening to institutions because they are ungovernable. They answer to something deeper, and because of this, they are often exiled, dismissed, or labeled difficult. But Jung believed they carry society's future within them. They are not relics, they are revolutionaries. To age like this is to refuse sedation, to remain awake, to become, in your final chapters, not a passive echo of the past, but a bold voice of the soul. The archetypal hero's journey doesn't end at the battle or the return. It continues quietly into the shadows of age. Jung understood that there's a second, less celebrated but equally vital journey that begins later in life. It is the final stage of individuation, the integration of all that we are. This journey is less about action and more about becoming. It's not about slaying dragons anymore. It's about understanding them. The late hero is not concerned with conquering the world. They're focused on the inner realm, the unifying of contradictions, the healing of the inner child, the surrender to mystery. In youth, the ego leads the charge. In age, the self takes over. This isn't a surrender of defeat. It's the arrival of deeper power, the kind that no longer needs recognition to be real. Jung believed that most people never complete this final journey. They remain stuck in earlier stages, recycling old wounds or clinging to old victories. But those who dare to continue, who keep digging, find something sacred. They become luminous from within. Their gaze becomes soft, their words few, but their impact immense. They are not perfect, but they are whole. This phase of individuation includes accepting mortality, making peace with paradox, and embracing the vast unknown. The late hero doesn't fear the end. They understand that the end is a return, a cycle fulfilled. To complete this journey is to truly live, even in the face of death. In a world obsessed with visibility, there's a quieter kind of legacy, one that can't be posted, shouted, or broadcasted. It lives in hearts, in ideas, in subtle but lasting shifts. Carl Jung's legacy is like this. Though he wrote and taught, his greatest impact was often invisible. The thousands who changed simply by encountering his ideas, his presence, his courage to explore the unknown. There is a fundamental difference between leaving marks and making noise. Noise is immediate, loud, often ego-driven. Marks are subtle, soul-driven, and sometimes not recognized until long after we're gone. The wise know this. They don't seek fame, they seek truth. And because of this, their words echo in eternity, not just on timelines. Jung often reminded us that the deepest transformations are internal. A word spoken at the right time, a question that lingers, a silence that heals. These are legacies too. They may not earn applause, but they change lives. The truly wise don't care who gets the credit. They care about the evolution of consciousness. In old age, we are asked, what are we leaving behind? Not in terms of wealth or reputation, but in presence, in resonance, in the stories we've told and the space we've created for others to grow. Jung's work continues not because it was loud, but because it was true. To age wisely is to understand that the soul speaks in whispers, and those whispers, when honest, can echo louder than any shout. Most people spend their lives running from death, denying it, distracting from it, delaying it. But Carl Jung taught a different approach. He believed that the ultimate act of wisdom is not to avoid death, but to befriend it, to die before we die, to let go of the ego's illusions, and in doing so, awaken to the eternal. This is not morbidity, it is enlightenment. To die alive is to release what no longer serves, identities, resentments, roles. It is to stop performing and start being. This death is not physical, it is symbolic. It is the dissolution of the false self, making space for the emergence of the soul. Jung saw this as the culmination of individuation, not an ending, but a sacred transformation. Those who have died alive carry a different energy. They are not afraid, they are not clinging. They meet each moment with grace, knowing that nothing can be truly lost. They've moved beyond fear into trust, trust in the psyche, in the soul, in the mystery beyond form. In this final stage, the wise one becomes a bridge between worlds, between time and timelessness, between the seen and unseen. Their presence becomes medicine, not because they offer answers, but because they embody peace. Death is coming for all of us, but Jung would ask, will you meet it whole? Will you arrive ready, not because you've avoided life, but because you've fully lived it? To die alive is the ultimate initiation, and those who accept it become, paradoxically, more alive than ever. In the quiet hours of the night, when the world has dimmed and the noise of ambition, fear, and distraction has fallen silent, something ancient begins to stir within us. Perhaps you felt it too, a longing, subtle yet relentless, to understand what this life is truly about. All the years we live, the lessons we endure, the dreams we chase, the pain we suffer. What does it mean if we do not become more than what we were? If we do not transcend the shell of survival and discover the soul of existence? Carl Jung believed that the purpose of life, particularly in its second half, was not merely to continue breathing, earning, or aging, but to awaken, to become whole. And in that wholeness, to find a depth of peace and presence that could never be achieved by external success alone. Jung's wisdom reminds us that aging is not the end, it is the unveiling. The soul begins to emerge more fully when the ego no longer needs to dominate. And if we allow it, the final chapters of our lives can become the most sacred, not because of what we do, but because of who we finally allow ourselves to be. But there is a question deeper than individuation, more eternal than the archetypes of psychology. It is a question that psychology, philosophy, and even science only begin to graze. What lies beyond us? Beyond the unconscious, beyond death, beyond the limits of human knowing? What or who is waiting there? Some have tried to name it God, others call it the mystery, the divine, the source. But for many, myself included, there is a name that echoes deeper than all others. Love. Not a love defined by human romance or fleeting emotion, but a love that is origin, essence, and end. A love that knows us beyond persona, beyond shadow, beyond success or shame. A love that watches us through every phase of life, childhood dreams, adult struggles, aging regrets, and never withdraws. A love that saw us before we were formed and will hold us after our final breath. And this love, this astonishing, relentless love, is described most powerfully in one sentence, a sentence whispered across generations, carried through time, and still alive today. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. This is John 3:16. And while you may recognize it from Scripture, I invite you now to hear it not as dogma, but as an invitation to realize that you are seen, not just by the human eyes around you, but by the Creator of the universe, that you are known, not only for your strengths, but for your wounds, your fears, and your failures. And still, you are loved. Not with the conditional affection we've grown used to, but with a love that lays itself down for your redemption. You see, all this time, while you've been striving to become wiser, better, freer, there's been a hand reaching out to you, not demanding your perfection, but offering you grace, not asking for performance, but for surrender. And this hand belongs to Jesus Christ, the Son of God, who entered into human existence not to judge or condemn, but to save, to heal, to restore. His life was the embodiment of truth and compassion. His death was the bridge between our brokenness and divine restoration. And his resurrection, his triumph over death, is the assurance that your story doesn't end in decay, but in renewal. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But what if the fullest expression of who you are is not found in self-discovery alone, but in relationship with the one who made you? What if the ache you feel in the stillness is not just psychological but spiritual, a longing for your Creator? And what if, in all your seeking, you've already been found? There is no shame in asking these questions. In fact, there is incredible courage in facing them, because the world teaches us to numb our longings, to laugh off the sacred, to perform instead of pray. But the soul was never designed to live without light. And the light of Christ is not a doctrine, it is a presence, it is a person, it is a love so deep it will pursue you into the darkest recesses of your past, and not rest until you are free. You don't need to understand everything to begin. You don't need to fix yourself before you are welcome. Right now, in this very moment, the door stands open, And Christ waits, not with judgment, but with open arms. He knows the wounds you carry. He knows the battles you've fought. And still, he calls you beloved. All he asks is that you say yes. To accept Jesus is not to join a religion. It is to return home. It is to finally rest in the knowledge that you are enough, not because of what you've done, but because of who he is. It is to surrender your life, not in defeat, but in trust. And in that surrender, to receive a life far greater than the one you could ever build on your own. If your heart stirs as you read this, do not harden it. Let it speak. Let it lead you. Maybe you don't have all the answers, but you know you've been searching. You've been waiting for something real, something eternal. This is it. Jesus Christ is not a myth. He is not an abstract symbol. He is alive, and he wants to walk with you, not just into wisdom, but into everlasting life. So here's what I invite you to do, gently and honestly. Just whisper a prayer, something simple, something true. Maybe like this: Jesus, I don't know everything, but I know I need you. I believe you are the Son of God. I believe you died for my sins and rose again. I ask you to forgive me, to save me, and to be the Lord of my life. I give you my heart. I give you my future. I receive your love. Amen. That's it, not magic words, just the beginning of a relationship. If you prayed that sincerely, welcome to the most beautiful journey you could ever embark on. You're not alone anymore. You're not lost. You are found. And if you've made it to this part of the video, I just want to thank you, truly. You could be anywhere, watching anything, and you chose to be here. That means something. It means you are seeking truth. And that makes you rare, powerful, and deeply valuable. So if this message touched you, if something in these words stirred your soul, I invite you to take one more step. Like this video, subscribe to this channel, and share it with someone you care about. You never know who might be needing this exact message today. Let's build a space where truth, wisdom, and the love of God can breathe freely. A space where people don't just grow older, but become truly wise. And if you accepted Christ today, please let us know in the comments. You are not alone. We want to celebrate with you, pray for you, and walk with you on this new path. This isn't the end of your story. It's just the beginning. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening, not just with your mind, but with your heart. And above all, never forget, you are deeply loved, eternally valued, and divinely purposed. Until next time, stay open, stay grounded, and stay aware. The journey continues, and you're not walking it alone anymore.